Welcome back to Own Your Yes. I'm Dr. Phyllis, your coach. This is episode 87, and we're continuing our four-part series for the month of May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. So today's part two, under this series that is titled Unseen, Unspoken, Unwell. The real cause of constant motion. And it's been about talking about, sis, there are some costs of just being continually in motion on autopilot, which I feel is really can be at the core of your feeling of burnout. And in part two this week, I want to talk under the topic, especially when resilience becomes a mask. Let me say that again. When resilience becomes a mask. Let me ask you a question. Two questions, actually, for you to consider. What if your strength has become your silence? What if your strength has become your silence? And what if the mask that's been created, this persona of how strong and resilient you are, is costing you more than you realize? Hmm. I have shared with you that the label, the descriptor, the title of me being resilient was a badge of honor for me for years. I really would get a sense of validation. Although it would be fleeting, it wouldn't last long. There was a high that came along with feeling how resilient I was and how I pushed through. And when people would tell me, "You're so resilient," oh, I would just feel so good about myself. And as I said, it only would last for a short time. And it became a thing that I felt somehow that gave me value and worth in people's eyes. So I would try to people please. I would self-sacrifice. I would go up and beyond. I can do it myself. I would infrequently ask for help. I would try to do it all for this feeling of being considered resilient. And actually, I thought that's what resilience meant is you push ahead, you don't get tired, you do everything yourself, you don't ask for help, you don't admit the things that are, are wrong, or people's words are wrong, their actions are wrong. I would take on the burden of fault for things. I would say I'm sorry just to help get through a situation, avoiding confrontation because I was resilient. And since I was so resilient and my shoulders were so strong, I would avoid calling people out. I would carry it. I would say I'm sorry just to facilitate the situation. And as I said, I would go up and beyond. And probably to the point, I'm going to be honest, it wasn't just my time, which a lot of time was given to certain people where the relationships were one-sided, but there was also money. Money given because, I was I could make the sacrifice to help. And don't get me wrong. There's situations that that's appropriate, but it's where the intent was coming from because there were certain actions that I felt was my duty in being resilient that I would make those sacrifices or just put up with anything at the sacrifice to my own identity. That's the problem, sis. There was a time that I was so caught up in the striving and the achieving. There was a point at which the achieving, my resilience and my identity all got blurred together. That is until life hit the fan, if you know what that means. Life hit a crossroads. God had to get my attention. And I'm sitting here like hitting my hands if you see me on YouTube, just to say, to give it the God had to get my attention, sis, because I was ignoring his signals. That I was wearing my resilience. I was operating my sense of this resilience had become my GPS. This external validation had become who I was to the point that I was disconnected. It was a mask. And because the more I received kudos or praise for being so resilient, somehow I thought I was winning the Academy Award for resiliency. But it had become a role I was playing. It had become a mask that I was playing so much that I was disconnected from truly who I was, truly what God's purpose, the bigger purpose for my life was, to the point that I was not listening to the signals that he was sending me that something needed to change. That wasn't until he really got my attention by having things happen that I no longer could ignore. And praise be to God that he did. And from that experience, I really had to start thinking that resilience doesn't mean that you're not human, that you don't acknowledge your feelings, that acknowledge who I was and I am as an individual, and call people out when they're wrong, or let people carry their own burdens in certain situations. Or just because I can, I don't have to do. That's where I learned to own my yes. And really, underneath it all, the main lesson and the point that I want you to get today, sis, is that resilience isn't about hiding pain or as you hear me say, and I even mentioned last week of sucking it up and pushing on. Resilience is about honoring truth. And you've heard me talk about the importance of emotional honesty, masking fatigue, grief, fear in the name of strength or resilience only deepens the disconnection from really being alive, being connected to God, being connected to our families, being connected to our passions and purpose that God has created us for. Resilience is not about living life behind this mask of everything's okay and I'm all right and I'm fine. And resilience means getting back up. Resilience means being able to laugh at yourself. It means to be able to cry when something hurts. It means to be able to see people for who they are. It means to have the courage to say, "You know what? I don't need to invest my yes into that anymore." It's to say, "You know what? I'm really feeling burnout. I'm really feeling depleted. I need to make a change." That's what it's about, sis. And so it's really important on that point about the fact that resilience isn't about hiding pain. The second follow-up part of that is true resilience doesn't hide the cracks. You don't hide your cracks. You don't hide your vulnerabilities. You don't hide the that you don't know something. You don't hide the fact that you need some help on something. That someone hurts you, that there's a pain, there's a void, there's a gap. Resilience makes room for healing as well. And you can still be resilient, yet deal with the pain that's come along the years and not just I'm sorry, the best way I can say it is just sucking it up and absorbing it. Because that's just the way it feels. I say it because I think about a little detour. I don't know if, if you've ever seen the X-Men or there's other superheroes, but the X-Men is Wolverine and he has titanium his body's made of and he has this healing power that when something happens, like there's an injury, it just absorbs and disappears. And there's been other superheroes where they're injured and it just goes away and they don't feel it. And I really feel that if we as high achieving resilient Christian women aren't careful, we start to live our lives that way cuz I did. And I've talked to many women that live their lives just something injure them. They don't deal with the source. They don't deal with making sense of what happened. They don't try to address it and see what lesson or change they need to make, or how they need to pivot. They just absorb it just like that and keep moving. So again, true resilience doesn't hide the cracks. It makes space for healing. It makes space for realizing you don't have to have all the answers, that you don't have to do everything, that you can laugh, you can have fun, that you can, as I said, you can let other people do some things and you still can be resilient because you're still getting up each day and living life. And so I want you to think about, if we don't do this, if you don't do this, the three things that can happen. There's three things I want to address that can be signals that you are wearing your resilience as a mask. Number one, you're emotionally numb. You're constantly downplaying your feelings. I've been there. As I said, I used to say, "Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, no problem." Someone would do something, no problem, because I thought that even as a leader, that, I'm just supposed to, nothing, as they say, the old folk used to say about water rolling off the back like a duck. Oh, that meant that I'm resilient. I'm a good leader. I don't let anything affect me. And because I was trying to people please supervisors, I've done all of that. And that can be a sign of wearing resilience like a mask, constantly downplaying your feelings. And the issue, sis, is that when you do that, people just take for granted that you'll deal with it. Like, it doesn't phase you. So they will continue, especially if it's having to do with a person, they will continue to act inappropriately or mistreat you because they feel like, oh, well, she can deal with it. And then because you become so emotionally numb and you just downplay your feelings. The next thing is, and you heard me share with you that I had this as well. I had the emotional numbness. Had become disconnected from my identity. I had lost touch with who I was beyond the role. So, sis, you can also lose touch with who you are beyond your role, be at work, at home, extended family, friends, community, church. When you wear this resilience, this sense of strength as a mask, you become disconnected from who you are. And thirdly, there's delayed healing. You can't start to deal with the pains and the hurts that potentially have contributed to this misperception that you have of resilience unless you name it. Unless you put it out there and call it out. Even if it's journaling to say, you know what? How did I get here? How did I get to this point where I'm feeling emotionally numb. I'm disconnected from who I am, and I have unresolved issues. There's so much pressure and feelings in me that because what happens is as you continually to numb yourself and disconnect and you're so caught up in just absorbing and keep on moving and down, as I said, downplaying everything, that you get to a point where you become resentful. You become resentful. And so if you want to be able to get past this and live your best life and get reconnected to truly who you are and to bring some emotion and humanity and in life engagement, to engage with life and reconnect with passions that you have and interests that you have, and stop feeling burned out and stop feeling like life is monotonous. You have to call out the wounds, the hurts, the pain, so you can heal. So this week, I want you, sis, to grab your journal, and I want you, and I say journal, put it in your phone in that note section or dictate it. Name one truth that you haven't admitted to yourself because you feel the pressure to be strong and, oh, it didn't affect me. I'm okay. Name one truth that you've been holding on to that you haven't admitted has really derailed you and messed you up. I want you to write it down. Don't judge yourself because you've still been holding on to it. Write it down. Write it down. Stop holding on to it. Write it down. Because I can tell you, it was a part of my healing process. I had to write it down. Then I could pray to God to help me, and I could then be able to start talking about it in a trusted circle. And most importantly, I could talk about it to myself and heal, to start opening those doors so that I could really pray on it and think about it and ask the Lord to give me a new perspective and turn it into growth instead of stagnation and this mask. So, again, I want you to name one truth that you haven't admitted out loud to yourself because you feel the pressure. Oh, it didn't affect me. I'm okay. I'm built for this. Write it down and don't judge yourself. Because I want you to understand that God's got you. He knows it already. He's just waiting for you to admit it so he can really connect and you all can start talking. And I wanted to share this scripture for you to meditate. It's Second Corinthians 12:9, and this is from the New King James Version. My grace is sufficient for you. My strength is made perfect in weakness. And I want to paraphrase it to say that as Paul was writing this letter to the Corinthian church, that he wanted you to know, he wanted them to know, he wanted me to know, he wanted you to know that God's grace through Jesus Christ is sufficient for you. God's strength is perfect. It's made perfect in our weaknesses. Because I want to leave you with this and another thought that I just feel like I don't want to wait. I got to leave this nugget with you before we close for this week, is that when you use you as your GPS for resilience, you're going to hit a wall. It's not sustainable. You're going to be definitely disconnected, burned out, and spiraling out of control. Yet, when we allow our cracks to open and we you realize that God should be our GPS, and your resilience, the right type of resilience, not a mass resilience, but a resilience that makes room for healing, makes room for our humanity, makes room for our vulnerability. And God is the right type of resilience. So I pray that this episode and your homework for the week of identifying your one truth will be helpful to you. And if this episode has been helpful to you, please share it with a friend, a family member, and let's grow this movement of high achieving Christian women who have the ability to change the trajectory of our lives, and go from being in burnout and on autopilot and switch it up, get reconnected to who we are and truly who God has created us for, his purpose to live our best life. I love you, and I look forward to seeing you next week for part 3. Love you. Take care. Bye-bye now.